Hello everyone and welcome to the third video in the help series for the Research Participation Scheme, also known as SONA. In this video we're going to be looking at how you can have your participant account upgraded to a researcher account. So this is the point at which you're planning your dissertation research and you are looking at using SONA to advertise your research and recruit participants. So you need to have collected some research participation credits prior to this in order to be able to use the SONA or the Research Participation Scheme to advertise your project. What that means is you need at least one credit, which is equivalent to 15 minutes of participation in someone else's research. And we'll have a look at, depending on the number of credits you've collected, the threshold that you've reached, how that breaks down with regards to the number of participants you can recruit for your own research. So if you've collected the 16 credits, the threshold, you can take out 25 hours worth of credits for your own research project. So if we look at that in terms of what that could break down to, so if it was a 10-minute online study, you could have around 150 sign-ups. If it's a 30-minute online study, or it could be an interview study, you could have around 50 sign-ups. If it was a 40-minute study, you could have 38 sign-ups and so on. So with 25 hours worth of credits, you can collect quite a lot of data. If you have collected between 1 to 15 credits yourself, you can't have the full 25 hours worth of research participation credits, but you can take out 10 hours worth of credits. So what that would look like is, if it was a 10-minute study, you could have 60 sign-ups. If it's a 30-minute study, you could have 20 sign-ups. And if it's a 40-minute study, then you could have 15 sign-ups. So it's still worth using the SONA scheme, the Research Participation Scheme, if you want to recruit School of Psychology staff or students for your research. So as long as you've collected at least one credit, you can use it to advertise your project. In terms of where to find out more information, you need to go onto Blackboard, and depending on which degree you're registered for, you'll either have access to the Postgrad MSc General Psychology organisation page, or you'll have access to the MSc Counselling organisation page. So whichever of those you have access to, you just need to click on it, and it will take you to a page that looks like this. And if you look on the left hand side, there's a tab called Research Participation Scheme. If you click on that, all of the information that we're going to be looking at in this video is there. So what you have is this, you've got other help videos about setting up a participant account prior to trying to advertise your own research. So you have to have a participant account for it to be converted into a researcher account. And once you've got ethical approval, you need to create an advert, and there's a request form here which asks for all the information that's needed to create your advert. That has to be approved by your supervisor, and it's your supervisor who then needs to send that completed signed form to me. Underneath the request form there is some further guidance, and I'll look at this in a little bit, in relation to setting up the information and the setup of online studies, and the information and setup of standard studies. That's where it's synchronous. You have to be present and collect data either face-to-face or on the telephone or things like that. So if we have a look at the SONA request form, this is the form that you'll need to fill out once you've got ethical approval and you're ready to start advertising your research on SONA and collecting data. So this is what the form looks like. So as we can see, you have to put obviously your name, your supervisor's name, and your student email address. Now this must be the University of Worcester email address, and this should be the University of Worcester email address that you've used to create your participant account on SONA, because that's the account that will be essentially upgraded to a researcher account by the Research Participation Scheme, i.e. me, Laura Skerlock-Evans. So next you need to choose what type of study, because this changes the layout of the advert and the sorts of options that are available to you. So a standard study would be one where there's some sort of perhaps a face-to-face element, or it needs to be conducted over the telephone. So that's when you have to have dedicated time slots arranged with a participant in order to complete the research. So that might be if you're doing research in hard copy form, if you're doing experiments, if you're doing face-to-face interviews or focus groups, or as I said, if you're doing a telephone-based interview, you would choose this option. The next one is an online type of study, which is if you're using things like eSurvey Creator, which is a platform that you can use to put your questionnaires online and distribute them, you would need to choose this option. The other option are for more unusual designs, and that sometimes there'll be multiple phases in the same study, so a participant may need to take part in multiple aspects of the research, perhaps a questionnaire and then an interview. So that's what this option provides you with. Study name, this needs to be something that's clear and catchy. You can only have 100 characters, and that includes spaces, and not 100 words, 100 characters. So it's got to be fairly short, fairly concise. And what you're thinking of here is it needs to be obviously reflective of the research, but it needs to be a bit of a hook for the reader. Now, adverts that go up onto SONA are randomly ordered when people look at the available studies. So it doesn't matter, you don't have to try and pick a study name beginning with the letter A to get on the top of the list or anything. The URL, this is if it's an online study and if it's an external study, so that means, as I said, you've used eSurvey Creator, SurveyMonkey, or something like that to create your research, then that needs to go in there. That is the link that your participants will need to follow if they want to complete your research. Now, sometimes people have multiple versions of the same questionnaire, so they may have multiple links. If that's something that affects you, then please do get in touch with the research participation scheme to discuss how that would be set up, because that will be not quite so straightforward. So just remember to email the psychsona@wook.ac.uk, give a brief outline of the study and the issue, and then we can look into it. So the next part is a brief description of the study. Again, there is a limit to this. Now, this is 250 characters, not words, and that includes spaces. So you've got to be very concise, but also don't perhaps just cut and paste from your ethics application form. This is where you're really going to recruit your participants. So this is the hook. This is where you're showing why it'll be interesting for people to take part, why it's meaningful, and so on. You can provide a more detailed description as well in here, which is you can have 15,000 characters, but that's optional, that's not a requirement. If you have any eligibility or exclusion requirements, which these have to be agreed with your supervisor before they can be put on the advert, they should be listed here. You need to give an idea of how long it will take. Now, this will be an estimate, but it needs to be a realistic estimate. And this is what's going to be used to calculate the number of sign-ups you can have, but also the number of credits that you can award for your study. So it's also a bit of a draw as well for participants. If there's any other information, prerequisites or disqualifiers, so if they have to have taken part in another study before they complete yours, that information would need to go in there, and that's used to help set up the advert as well. Okay. So once you've completed that, you need to send that to your supervisor, and they may ask you to make changes based on your ethics form and your ethical approval. But once that's agreed, once that's approved, your supervisor then needs to send that form to psychsona@wook.ac.uk. They have to be signed by you and your supervisor. They can be signed electronically. Now, forms sent for the research participation scheme are checked and uploaded every Monday. Okay, so let's imagine that we've set up a fictional study. So that form has been sent to the research participation scheme, and it has now been uploaded to SONA. what will happen is that you'll get an email telling you that your advert has now been uploaded, but that you need to prepare it in order to make it active and visible to students, and also to set up time slots. So when you log in to your account, it will look something like this. We'll look at the test survey. So imagine this has been set up. Okay, so we've got some information here. We can see we have 25 hours worth of credits that we can use, so that equates to 150 sign-ups in this case, because participation in the study will take 10 minutes. The study is worth 1 credit. We can see that the researcher is Laura Skerlock-Evans, that's me. And we can see that it's an online external study. Now this is a test survey, so this is just kind of, this isn't a real study here. But what it would mean is that you'll be sent through this information. Now, at the moment, this study won't necessarily be active. It will be inactive, and you need to change it in order to make it ready to be advertised. So you need to go to the study information, view administer time slots, and this is where you would set up your time slots. Now, I've created a time slot here just to show you what it would look like. Usually, if it's an online study, then you will have a single time slot, which will be the participation deadline, so the point at which you want to stop collecting data. So that would be there, and the time, whatever time of the day that you wanted to finish it. Perhaps you want to finish it midday. And then you would need to say how many participants you recruit. So we'll do that now. So we would go to add a time slot. Now you're getting a warning now because this study is currently inactive and people can't see it in order to take part in it. That's fine. We just want to set up our time slots before anyone can take part anyway. So the final participation date, as I said, because it's an online study, that will be the last day by which we want people to have taken part. We'll set up a single time slot, and then we'll just adjust the number of participants that can take part in that time slot. So if we set our final participant deadline as the 22nd of December, we'll say the final participation time is going to be 5 o'clock. Now we can have up to 150 participants. Some people have already taken part in this as for the sake of demonstration, so I'll just change that to 100 participants, and I'll add the slot. So we can see that we have a second time slot here. 100 people can take part in it. We've got currently 100 slots. Nobody's taken part in that yet, but that is also because we haven't made it active. So once we're happy with the way that this is set up, then we can make the study active. Now to do that, we would go to Study menu and change Study information. Now here is all the information about the research. And what we need to do is change, is it an active study, from no to yes, and then save the changes, and we can see our study has been updated. And if we check that, if we go to all studies and we scroll down, these are all the active studies, we can see we're there now. Okay, so that's really good. At the time at which you want to close the survey, you would select it, choose Study menu, change Study information, and select Active Study from yes to no, and save changes. So the study's now been updated. We can double check. So we can check if it's active or not anymore by clicking on My Studies. We can see there's nothing inactive now, but there are a number of studies that are inactive, and we can see that's one of them. So that is for an online study. Now imagine that we had set this up differently, that it was due to be a face-to-face study. Then the way that we would need to advertise the research is slightly different. In here there needs to be, as part of your description, probably in the the more detailed description box allowed to you, this one, you would need to have instructions written in there for participants on if they want to take part in the study, how do they sign up. And sometimes it's easier to contact the researcher, and they should be able to click on the button here and email the researcher to arrange a time to meet, if it's a face-to-face study, if it's an experimental study or interview study, and so sometimes that's easier to do outside of SONA. So there needs to be clear instructions on if people want to take part, how do they do that, and if it is arranged out of SONA with the researcher, what you can then do is set up your time slots retrospectively, or an alternative is that you have set times where you're going to be available, and there is clear information about where that is. Okay, so information on setting up the time slots is in this document as well, so there's another example, and it takes you through adding time slots for an online study. So this is on the Blackboard page. So there's setting up your advert if it's an online study here, and then there's setting up your study if it's a face-to-face interview or an experimental design or a telephone-based interview or something like that, a focus group, something like that. Then there are separate instructions. So if we had, in fact, we weren't doing an online study, we were doing something that was more face-to-face or required a specific time and place in order to conduct the research, then we would need to take a slightly different approach. So this time, if you click on time slots and add a time slot, then you'll get a slightly different screen. So there are two options for adding multiple time slots at once. You may add a specified number of time slots, or you may duplicate the time slot configuration from a specific week. So there are different ways of doing it. So it might be best to pilot it with one time slot first. You would need to specify the date that you're going to be free, the time that you want people to be there, the number of free slots between the sessions. So if you wanted to do, if your research took 20 minutes to complete and you wanted to do 3 on the same day, then you could specify a break in between that. You would need to say when you wanted them to start, when to finish, and the number of participants that could sign up to each time slot. So if that is a single face-to-face interview, then it obviously needs to be one person per time slot, or if it's an experiment or something like that. If it's a focus group and you want up to 5 people, you could change that to 5 people. You also need to put the location, so you need to know where you're going to be conducting the research, and include that. And then you would click add, and your time slots would appear in a similar way, and you'd be able to go to My Studies. In this case, you'd look at your research, and you could click on View Administer Time Slots, and you can see everyone that's participated, and we can see here that we have one person's participated so far. Okay, so once you've collected data, it's a good idea to keep an eye on participation. Now, your advert will be set up in such a way that you will be notified of sign-ups to your research and cancellations. So once people have taken part and they've demonstrated to you that they've taken part in line with the ethics form, then you can award them the credit. And it's good to keep an eye on that and to sort of do that at fairly regular intervals. To award a credit, you would go to Modify. You see all the people who have taken part, and you click OK, so they've participated. You would update the sign up, and you would have granted them the credit. Now imagine perhaps you've got an interview-based study and the person didn't signed up but never came to the interview. Then you've got a couple of options. If they contacted you within good time to tell you why they couldn't take part, then you can have them as an excused no-show. What this means is that They won't get a credit because they haven't participated, but they won't be penalised. If they said they would attend and they did not contact you to say that they weren't going to take part anymore, they just didn't show up and there was no reason given and it wasn't timely, then you can click no show. Now what happens is if people accrue enough no shows, then they will have a penalty attached to them, and that is in the direction of having to collect more credits in order to hit the threshold in their own research for getting that 25 hours worth of participation. If people have participated and you're happy with that, then you need to just grant them the credit. Update the sign up, and there we go. So hopefully that's given you an idea of the process for using SONA as a researcher. If you have any questions, then please do get in touch with the Research Participation Scheme through psychsona@work.ac.uk. If you have any questions about the form, then or your supervisor does, please just get in touch. It's important to remember that completed request forms can only be uploaded if they are sent by your supervisor. Just to avoid any confusion. But if they're sent to psychsona@work.ac.uk, that account is checked every Monday and the adverts are checked and uploaded then. Okay, thank you.